we have an amazing opportunity on the planet right now that if we capitalize the gift that we have of technology and how interconnected we are and utilizing mediums like podcasts and storytelling and documentaries, we can make the healing shift on this planet a living reality. I do feel like I know my purpose. I do feel like I know who I am and what I am and how I can show up in the planet.
Welcome to the Multiverse, where we believe that mushrooms can actually change the world, and that if humans mirrored the magic and wisdom of the fungi kingdom, we would have a far more joyous and connected planet. Each week, we'll be meeting with thought leaders and experts to extract the best insights and stories across everything from functional fungi, psychedelic medicine, and so much more. Thanks for listening. Step into the Multiverse with us. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Into the Multiverse. I'm really excited right now. I'm really happy to be here on my couch because I have one of my favorite people in the world sitting 2 feet from me. His name is André Duqum. And by way of introduction, there's so many things I could say about you, but I think I'd like to summarize it with you're an incredible creator. You're so talented in the world of media as medicine, as you like to call it. And you're just one of the best humans, like most soulful humans that I know. I've seen you go on such a, journeys in the short time that we've known each other. And when people bring your name up or when I speak about you, as of recently, one of the things that has been coming most to mind is that you live your life like a ceremony, which is something that I've shared with you. And that's kind of where I want to start because there's so much ritual that you put into everything that you do. And the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And I'd like you to share, to start, what are some of your favorite ceremonial things that you do for yourself in a day? And then we'll get into like a little bit more of how you got here, all that stuff. But just like start there. How do you ceremonialize a day?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Allie.
I'm so happy you're here.
Such like a meta full circle kind of thing happening with the production company and the mutual podcast guests that we have on the same day. Yes, it's just fun that we get to do this.
We're just cycling each other on guests on each other's couches.
Yeah. So good. It's both of our second podcasts of the day.
Yes.
Living life as a ceremony. For me, I think that every day when I wake up, I'm very cognizant that how I start the day is going to be the energy and resonance in which the rest of my day carries that. And so it starts really the night before. I think what you're putting into your consciousness. We all, as individuals living in Western society where we have so much stimulus constantly in our day-to-day life, we have to be very aware of what we're putting into our system because what we put in is what we put out. And so starting with the night before, really being aware of not having, cell phones and technologies and blue light within the first, the last couple hours of night to make sure that I can get good rest. I'm a grandpa. I go to bed pretty early.
Literally like 8:30, Andre's out.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm always leaving parties and gatherings early because I like to wake up and feel like my best self.
You do that thing. I just have to brief interjection here is like there's this meme going around the internet that's really funny. It's like, when a Midwestern dad is like ready to leave a party, he just slaps his leg and goes, "Welp." And I have this vision of you whenever I know you're about to leave and I'm like, no, Andre's about to leave. And it's just kind of like, "Welp, it's my time."
Destiny is calling.
Your eye mask and your retainer in your mouth is calling.
Literally, yeah. So good. So yeah, it's really important for me just to, I feel I really enjoy play. I enjoy community. I love spending time out with friends, and I really am dedicated to my mission, my purpose in life. Mm-hmm. And for me to show up fully in what I feel like I'm here to devote myself to, I want to feel my best. And so that goes into living my life as a ceremony, which starts the night before into the next day. And I've always had, maybe more so probably the past 6-7 years, the understanding of how time really passes much faster than we perceive it to be. And one day, if you're 20, you're going to wake up when you're 30. God willing, if you're 30, you're going to wake up 40, 50, 60 years old and say, what happened to my life? And realize how much our life happens in a way that we're largely unconscious of. And I realized that if I could set up some systems and infrastructure, and, if you will, into my morning routine, into my daily practice that can energetically allow me to be more present in my day, I almost suck more of my life back into the day And so I get to live longer in a weird way because I'm more aware and I'm raising my consciousness throughout the day. And so it starts with my morning practice, and that's evolved and shifted and changed over the years of what that's really looked like. It started about 7 years ago when I started doing these Vipassana meditation retreats, and I would do, 45 to an hour long meditation, just like my stillness practice every single morning. It always includes some sort of movement. Nowadays it's, going on longer morning walks, listening to an audiobook after my morning practice. And I do these different kriyas that I learned from Sadhguru's at Sadhguru's ashram, something called Shambhavi Mahamudra, and another one called Shakti Shalani Kriya and Shunya meditation, and like these different technologies that I've really learned that just make my level of energy, my energetic vibrance much higher throughout the day. And so my mind and my body find a level of coherence that gives me access to spirit, in which then you can live your life in a ceremony, right? When you say live life as a ceremony, it's not that I take my life seriously, but I take good care of myself so that I can show up fully in full presence throughout my day, and that is inherently feels like a ceremony, because you're tapped into the divine within you more. And so, for my meditations to all the things that I do throughout my day, right? Who we are is not just what we do, but it's also not what we don't do. And so, being very mindful of, like I said earlier, of the various different inputs that we have in our life. To then go and live life in ceremony. And there's so many different elements that we could go into with this. I think that waking up and doing something that you feel like you were put on here on earth to do in your own unique creative way, I think is so important. A lot of people deal with procrastination, and that is really a byproduct of waking up and doing something you don't want to do. Of course, you're going to put something off and postpone something that you don't want to do. But if you can wake up and find something that you genuinely love doing, it's going to pull you out of bed and give you that much more energy to do everything you're doing in life. So from everything that I do in my life, from building my business to my podcast to movement and my sauna cold plunge in the morning, I try to set up my life so that I can really show up fully and then pursue the things that really light me up.
Everything you just said is so beautiful and kind of like this gold standard of what people are moving towards, all those different elements. Like you just threw out, first of all, a bunch of words that I have no idea what you said when you were talking about all the morning meditations you did. Yeah. I'll have to re-listen to that. I'm super curious and I'd love to implement a few of those into my routine. But there's so much that goes into making you show up in the world the way that you do. And it's not all by accident. It's not like you just woke up and started implementing these and it was easy. Like what people don't see, the behind the scenes, is like what, steps and years and all of the learnings and lessons to like cause you to be where you are at this point in time. And I want to talk about age later because it's like a whole, interesting conversation. Like what is age? But, you're so young, as am I. Like I'm only a few years older than you, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like this point in time that you're at, you're like, in my opinion, highly evolved, so present, so in your soul, so in your purpose. And I'd love you to kind of take us back to like 16-year-old André.
Sure.
Who were you then? And like close the gap of like, how'd you get here? As much as you want to share kind of just like major points in time, that whether it was like big inflection points or just something you picked up along the way, but just kind of close the gap of like, who were you when you were 16?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for the reflection. I think that there's been some core threads that have stayed pretty consistent. One, I've always been a curious dude. Like I've always just asked a lot of questions, question authority, and, question the status quo in a way that I wasn't satisfied with not knowing the truth, and that could go into any different area of life. It evolved into just like the nature of reality as like that was the deepest thing that I could really find. How I show up now, and you spoke to it a little bit, I really feel like what we do in the dark is what shows in the light, right? So it's earlier on in my journey, it showed up a little bit more as the vigilance of various different I think mechanisms within myself that wanted to show up in a way that would be perceived as good, as right, as righteous. And over the years, I would say over the past decade, I've really cultivated doing living my life as a ceremony, doing the things that I do genuinely because I love them and they fill me up and they just feel good for me. And so it's been a journey of more genuine authenticity coming into that place. But Yeah, I would say when I was 16, I got introduced to a business model at the time with just some guys in my high school that were like selling this health and wellness product, and I met somebody who was like 17, making a few $1,000s a month, just doing this business, and he was going around speaking at different public speaking events, building a team, and I got involved in the business at a time, and I made like $2,000 my first week in this business at 16. And it was more so, what attracted me was really the lifestyle of people that were in their early 20s, traveling, living life by design. And it was very appealing for me growing up in a typical Midwestern household in Michigan where, there is this kind of cutout path for most people in society, and especially in Western culture. If you go to school, you get a degree, you find a job, you work for 40 years of your life, you retire, and like that's kind of the road that's laid out for you. And I knew I just wanted more out of life. I've been blessed to have various beautiful teachers in my life, many of which I'm sure we'll talk to and speak to. But I just opened my eyes up to so much at a young age of what's possible, and that business over the next 3-4 years really took me on this journey of diving deep into personal growth. I adopted a growth mindset, and it was because it kind of required me of the business at the time, where I was starting to do public speaking. I was hosting home events. I was learning how to organize and lead a team of individuals. And, looking back on it right now, it's like some of it kind of feels a little cringe, but it's, if you're looking back on your history and you don't cringe a little bit, you're probably not growing enough. So I was definitely going through over 16 to 19 years old. I was going to various different Tony Robbins seminars. I was going to different Bob Proctor events and Eric Thomas, and reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and just being a student of life and absorbing all this information that, if I want to become more in life, if I want more in life, I have to become more in life. And so I went down this path of personal development, and it led me to very interesting places. I got to travel a lot by the time I was 19. When I graduated high school, I went to Michigan State University for about a quarter of a semester and dropped out just because I realized that what I was going to create in life was much bigger than what I could spend my time and money doing there. And I went on this journey of really trying to become the best version of myself. It became almost like a hunger. And like I said, I went on that journey of just being a voracious reader and studying all this material. And there was a few key moments for sure at different points in my life, where at 19, I met one individual who was a sixth descendant from the Shaolin Temple. He was an individual that was such a bright being, and he did this reading on me in an event with 50 people. And he said, whoever's the most courageous person, come up on stage. And I raised my hand first, and I went up on stage, and he did this like full reading on me. And it was profound, because it was very eye-opening to what's possible within human consciousness if you raise your consciousness enough. And why I say that is because he did this energetic reading on me. He was very clear and reading that I was in a crossroads in my life with various different things that were happening that we could go into, to things that were going on with my health, to even things that I had in my dreams when I was young or like earlier in that month. It felt very surreal and like miraculous in this way that just like expanded my vision up to like, oh, this magic is possible within the human spirit and human consciousness. And so then as I did, I was very curious and asked a lot of questions and took him out to lunch and studied a lot of other individuals as well. And I went on this journey of like purification more so after that. So about 19, I had that switch where I went and did a Vipassana meditation retreat. I did one of Sadhguru's courses in inner engineering. I started reading a lot of this type of material, and I moved out to LA to pursue videography and storytelling. I picked it up as a hobby originally, and it was something that I was always captivated by the capability that storytelling can really have on people. I'm sure whoever's listening to this right now, there's been a piece of film, a documentary, maybe even a photo that's really moved you and changed the way that you perceive reality in some fundamental way. And I knew that we have an amazing opportunity on the planet right now, that if we capitalize on the gift that we have of technology and how interconnected we are, and utilizing mediums like podcasts and storytelling and documentaries, we can make the healing shift on this planet a living reality. And we haven't had this access, up until the last 20, 25 years where the internet has been around. So I realized that if I wanted to raise the consciousness on the planet, that's always been kind of like my ethos, is I wanted to wake the world up from the hypnotic rhythm that people are typically in and lead them to truth, then to really affect the masses, I'm going to need to speak to the masses. And how do I speak to the masses? It's through video format. That's majority of people online right now are watching a video of some sort, whether it's on their devices, on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Netflix, or whatever it is online. It's moving that way. We see all these social apps that are, transforming into primarily video apps. And so there was that desire, that realization, then also just my genuine desire for the creative storytelling of videography. And I moved out to LA and started over the course of the next year, really going on this journey of traveling with different yoga influencers and conscious, health and wellness folks, and making content and kind of like freelance work. And that's how I was kind of, out here for my first year. And then around 2021, I got this cool opportunity to work with Logan Paul, who is a big, YouTuber and creator. And he was at an interesting point in his life where he was really humbled by a mistake or, decision that he made. And I was introduced to him, and I saw this opportunity of like, I could impact this individual's life so deeply, and that would impact so many millions of individuals that that follow him. And so over the course of the next few years, I went on this journey, traveling the world with him, creating amazing content, having the time of my life. And, I don't want to go too long on the story here, but essentially I developed over that time a deep skill set in podcast producing and video storytelling and understanding YouTube and Instagram and social media algorithms. My connections and my networks and the resources that became available at the time was really crucial and to, who I am and where I'm at now. And yeah, over the past few years, it's really been a journey of integrating everything that I've learned in my life, who I've become, into, really showing up in a way that I feel like is going to be supportive to the planet, which is one, my business, Meraki Media, which is, produces various different podcasts in the health and wellness, personal development space, including this one, to then starting my own podcast, Know Thyself, which has been beautiful. There's only like 6 or 7 episodes out right now, but it feels just like a very unique flavor in which I can offer support to the world, and it fills my cup up first and foremost. So doing that, and being able to share community and share space and have these conversations has kind of been a beautiful arc getting to this point. So there's been many different individuals and, technologies and modalities and courses that I've done that have really unlocked a deeper knowing of my own self. And then from that place, I get to show up in something that is uniquely myself.
It's pretty wild because you've done so much, like everything you just described, like that's a lot to even do in a decade, especially from the ages of 16 to 25, where most people, the average, let's just say American, is in full college party mode, just trying to figure out how they can optimize their social life up until age 23 or 24. So what's really beautiful is that you've got a massive head start because you felt this call that a lot of people get just later on in life. Right. And you actually had it during some of the most formative years. Your brain is still, hyper neuroplastic up until a certain point, That's who's to say this is true or not, but men's brains stop, developing really when they're 27. Mm-hmm. Women is a little bit younger than that. And you're still neuroplastic after your brain reaches full adulthood. But you had this massive, head start, and you moved really, just as a reflection, moved really fast through all of these things. In part, to bring it full circle, because you prioritize ceremonializing your life. So observationally, when people meet you, you don't, your energy doesn't feel frantic. That is common of people that move as quickly and do as much as you do. And I actually think that's the goal, right? To feel, I like to say thrive in the chaos, but feel calm in the chaos. That life is chaotic and there's always so much input. I think on average we get more stimulation than the average, cave person had in a lifetime in 30 minutes because of how much is happening in our world. Yeah. It's the Times Square versus the desert example of how much we're living in just chaos and input. And I think this is a really good transition into talking about the podcast. So you kind of mentioned it, but I've been, over the course of our friendship, which has just been so beautiful and deepening over the last few years. I think we've known each other for 2 years now at this point. Mm-hmm. but you've been talking about the podcast, wanting to start it. You've been spending all this energy elevating other people's voices, but you have so much to share within your own. So you finally have put that into this like work of art that you care so much about. And the podcast is called, you mentioned it, but Know Thyself.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was thinking through, this is a really long-winded question, but as I was thinking through what I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, it's comical because I usually like have my phone here with notes and I like, go on a deep dive, and I'm way more like, I love Tim Ferriss, his style of interviewing where he's like, super specific, like calling out things from people's past after deep work on the internet. And my phone fell down an elevator shaft last night. So I was like, story. I'm going to embrace this and just sit down with like someone who I consider one of my closest friends in the world and just like dive into them. And my question to you is like, at this point in your life, do you feel like you know thyself?
Yeah, I think it's an ever evolving path and journey. There's for sure, there's parts of me that I'm oblivious to or unaware of that I'm sure I will, realize and become aware of later in life as I go on my journey. Like, I think that first off, most people have this notion of spirituality, kind of speaking to what you talked to earlier, that there's this like, if you're spiritual, you kind of live this monastic life where it's a little inert and you're kind of live like a small, simple life, which is beautiful.
It's like cow in the rain.
Yes.
Very stoic.
Yeah.
Not a lot of joy.
Not
a lot of laughing.
No shame. No flack put on that. That's beautiful for people's path. But for me, in my personal path, I just felt spirituality was fuel on the fire for me to really do what I wanted to do on this planet. It gave me more of myself online, and became, on this journey of knowing myself. It's really the idea or notion of self is continually expanded as I've gone on my journey. I think that earlier on, like I said, it was a little bit more in the energy of self-preservation and focusing on the self almost with like a lowercase self of essentially who you're not. Like this is your name, your identity, who you come into the world, and you're given a race, a gender, a religion, a caste, creed, and you're kind of put into this box of definition of who you are. And like I said, who you're not. This self with a capital S self is who's in the background and what is in the background of all of that. Meaning there's this ever-present witness and observer of your experience in life. And the more that you can create separation between your thought and emotions and get in touch with that space, which is always present, then all of a sudden you start suffering a lot less, because it's almost like if I have some neuroses and I put it on a table with 3 legs, the table is just going to fall over because I've almost kind of kicked out the tables of who I think I am continually over the process, over the past, 5-6 years. And over those many, many ego deaths, coming to deeper understanding and knowing of who I am beyond any label, beyond who I say I am or what I say I do. I've come to a place where I do feel like I know my purpose. I do feel like I know who I am and what I am and how I can show up in the planet. And I'm sure it'll continue to evolve, and I'll want to continue to be of service in bigger and bigger ways. But I do feel like I know myself and know who I am. And there's still room for growth.
One of the things that you said during a conversation we had, and you really know thyself when you go through difficult things, right? Like it's easy to to feel aligned when things are going well. But it's been really beautiful to see you move through, and even talk to you about the challenges that I'm going through, like the way that you're able to perceive them as gifts very immediately. And there's like a careful dance between that. Right. Where it's like, you're not spiritually bypassing yourself and you're not like too quick, like shit's going crazy. And then you're like, this is a gift. Like people do that. And it's like, but then you just are totally passing the pain and the value of like actually feeling it, which has been like a huge lesson for me. And a lot of my lessons from psychedelics, which I want to talk about in a little bit, have really been like harnessing the pain and stepping into it to use it then as fuel to have more joy. But, your ability to perceive difficult things very quickly as gifts, I think is really beautiful. And can you just share a little bit about like how you get there, maybe some examples of difficult things that you've gone through, whether it's like, in the last year and how you've been able to move through them with like a lot of grace and ease? Because I've seen you, move through them with a lot of grace and ease. I know they've been difficult, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for the reflection. I think what I prioritize developing in my life is clarity, because the more that you have a clear perception on the nature of reality and how things are operating in your life, you're just going to have a better experience of life. And so when people come to me with their perceived issues or their perceived problems, it's first of all, like you spoke to, it's important to not bypass the human experience and the very real emotions that is within someone's reality. And it might feel real, it just might not be a truth. And so you can give somebody a perceptual reframe where I say, actually, what's happening in your life is a gift for you. And that might be empowering in a certain way. But it's also still a narrative that you're having about reality, meaning there's reality, which is what is in the moment. Something's just happening, right? And you can perceive it as for you or not for you. This is happening to me or it's happening for me. And the evolved path is life is happening as me. It's happening through me. And so it's important to acknowledge, to not bypass your experience of whatever human emotion that you're going through, whatever difficulty. It's here to teach you a lesson. And really the lesson always is to see where you're not free. Where are you trapped emotionally? Where are you defining yourself that is not in alignment with who you truly are? So that, that comes up in friends conversations and, conversations that we've had and even within my personal life, having the path that I've been on to developing that clarity. It takes a lot of work living in a modern life where there's so many distractions and external stimulus that are pulling at your consciousness constantly, day in and day out, to refine and to prioritize your own clarity and stillness in life. That comes from things that I've done within my personal life. Like I said, the different meditation retreats or doing 6 days in complete darkness or like whatever, these things that I've...
You just throw these like casual things. What?
Yeah.
We'll circle back on that.
Sure. But, putting myself in seemingly difficult, just gloss over 6 days in darkness. Yes, I'm happy to go into that. But putting myself in these seemingly uncomfortable situations where I just realized that if I can put myself into discomfort, then there's a life of comfort that's found on the other side of that, where a lot of people's other way around. They find this life of comfort that they're satisfied with, and they kind of stay within the realms of their compulsivity, and then they're going to be faced with a life of discomfort, either in their health, their mind, their spirit, and so on and so forth. So yeah, over the past year, I've had many different, the biggest one was my getting out of my relationship with Blue. Is like one of my first loves in life. 2.5 year beautiful conscious relationship that we shared in time, expansive, relationship that we shared. And, that was one of my first, I would say, I think getting out of the relationship with like your first love, you can call it heartbreak, or I like to frame it as like a heart open, because it really, relationships are the biggest mirrors for us to realize the love that we already have within ourselves. And the form might change, right? But the essence can still remain. And so I think a lot of people have a deep fear of loving deeply because there's the fear of loss of it. And when you realize that there is no loss of it, then you can love fully and show up in relationships fully surrendering yourself and being able to open your heart, as long as you've been able to cultivate the ability to know that nobody externally can break your heart. It's something that is self-created. And so being able to, one, have that realization, but then also tap into my own humanity of feeling the human spectrum of emotions. There's something inherently pleasant about feeling any emotion fully. I think that whether it's a difficult, sad memory, or there could be, so many different things that come up, especially, in terms of getting out of a relationship, and a romantic partnership. But, for me, it was actually pleasant to feel certain human emotions that I had never felt to that depth before. And for me, it's, I've grown up, and the more I've seen, it's kind of been like a constant theme where I don't know, I feel like either I've done a lot of the work at a younger age than maybe most people, or maybe I just didn't have as much trauma that I perceived as a younger individual, but I seem to have a lot less problems than other people. and so, but it's interesting, right? Because there's a level of relatability that comes in when you show up fully in your full mess and your magic. And so over the past year, I've gotten to tap into even deeper parts of my own quote unquote mess, if you want to call it that, that have brought me more back into my body and less in like a dissociated kind of state. And that's been really beautiful as well. So yeah, the full spectrum.
But it's a dance, right? Like, there's the idea of also being addicted to your trauma, right? It's like there's this massive movement in vulnerability and mental health. It's almost like sexy to talk about, like how broken we are.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of in a joking way, but like it's become something that's a lot, very soundbitey, and it's amazing because it's put so much awareness on like the largest problem arguably that the world is facing, which is mental health. Like, our entire life is between here and here. And like, if you really cultivate that like self-love and ownership of your thoughts, you will have a much more expanded and fulfilled life. Like, we know that. And so people sharing vulnerably about that is really beautiful, but then it's the dance of not staying in that place and like attaching to it.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. So anyway, I love kind of hearing the way that you speak about it, because it's not ignoring the feelings. It's actually just, sitting with them, but then also reframing them in a really beautiful way. And in the languaging around it is what I think really resonates for me, because, Olympic athletes, some of the best in the world, they've done all these visualizations. I was reading this book about this coach that would just, every time he would work with an athlete, he would reframe, when they would say, "Oh, I'm nervous." He's like, it's the same feeling, but like call it excitement. So every time that word would come up, they would call it something different.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you do is it's subtle. And I don't even know that that you do it. You probably do, because you know everything.
Not true.
Because you know thyself. No, but you're very careful about the words that you use, where it means the same thing, but you're using more fitting language. And like, I'll catch myself doing that, where like I'll say a word that doesn't quite feel right, but it's like the only word that I know to fit that. But you have such an expanded palette of language because you've studied all of these teachers. And so anyway, that's just kind of another observation. What I'd love to kind of like take this into, number one, I do want to chat about age, because it's a funny thing. And actually, amongst our community of people, there's, most of the people are in their 30s. Both of us are still in our 20s, which actually is not something that a lot of people know. And I actively didn't share my age with people until I was like 26. Like I really like danced around the question, because like, I was in corporate world where your age, if you go in like a hierarchical structure, and you had a very different path than me. I like went, like college, grad school, corporate. You go into hierarchy where like every year you ascend one rank, and then you like eventually, if you just like make it, then you're at the top of the pyramid, and the pyramid gets smaller. And but that being said, age was very directly correlated with experience and knowledge and all of these things. And you're very limited by your age. And can you just speak to like how you think about age? Because one of the things that people often say to you is like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe you're so young." Yeah. I hear it all the time. It's like, people are like, "Oh my God, can you believe André is this age?" And like, he's figured all this, he just has a perspective that is not usually until later on in life. Like, how do you make sense of that?
Yeah. I think that, I've gotten that reflection a bunch, and I've always been, even since I was like 11 years old, I was always hanging out with the kids who were in high school and like older. So I think it's just part of my wiring to where, I, especially when I kind of shared a little bit of my journey getting into, 16, 17, 18, 19, I started developing and finding a desire for a growth mindset. And that's something that typically you don't kind of realize until life hits you hits you in the face with a piece of 2x4 when you're, in your mid 20s, when you're like, oh shit, I got to figure my life out. But for me, I was able to, and grateful for the wisdom and different books and teachers that really, enabled me to have a good perception of what to do with my time. And so I think I just started on a path earlier than most, and of course, there's some things that just can't be replicated with age. Like there's a certain amount of experience that you get when you're 40, 50, 60, that no matter how wise you are at 20, it's, there's just a difference there. But in terms of perceiving life as it is, it doesn't matter necessarily really what age you are, because life is what life is, no matter what age you are. So if you have a clear perception on reality, then it doesn't matter if you're 80 or if you're 18, you can be in touch with truth within yourself. So I think that a lot of times people can, use age as something to define themselves and hold them back and be a limiting belief as to why they maybe can't succeed at a certain time, or various different things and limiting beliefs that can come up through age, whether it's I'm too old or I'm too young, and I'm too much, I'm not enough. Like, we have all of these beliefs about who we are. And for me, being able to just silence my mind and like not be so identified with my thoughts of like, you know what, I am 20. I could just go kind of screw off for the next 5-10 years and just have fun and do the college thing and party and drink. And, I could explore that, but ultimately I just wouldn't feel fulfilling. Like, it's not what would excite me and make me feel fulfilled in life. And so I think that we're all just operating at different paces, and it's in the full accepting of our path that we can really show up and be ourselves and be effective leaders. And so accepting your path wherever you are, whoever's listening to this right now, whatever age you're at, there's so many people that didn't get their big start or break in life until they were 60 and 70 years old and, lived a beautiful life after. And so, yeah, I just don't look at it as much as a reflection that I do get it. I don't really just take it seriously. And, there's this quote in the Dhammapada from Buddha. It says, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, as a rock is not moved by the crashing of the waves, a sage is not moved by praise or blame. And for, the beautiful reflections that I do get, whether it's, fortunately beautiful reflections from people in community or, nice words, or maybe some people online that send nasty words, it really doesn't, I appreciate it, but it doesn't actually affect my inner state because I kind of know who I am beyond that. So it's been a journey. And I just don't find myself by it.
Someone gave me, or asked me, I guess, a question around like, what is your biological age and then your spiritual age?
Yeah.
And so I actually think there's like, it's less about like, how old are you? It's like, how, old are all these different parts of you? Like, how old is your actual inner child? Like, maybe she's 7, maybe she's 4. Like, there's different, it's not as black and white as like, how old are you? Which is, I think, just, it speaks to how awake you are. And one of the things I like to think about a lot is like, rather than, how old are we? How many years chronologically have we lived, right? From like birth until death, how many trips around the sun? It's like, how awake were you for those years? And one of the things you said is like, I'm trying to live many lifetimes in one. Like, I like to think about, you can actually live a lifetime of presence. And a lot of what you think about and talk about, on the podcast and otherwise is like how to be and how to be present, right? Like, that is the goal, to be as present as possible. And when you're really present, time expands. Like, we were just chatting about this on the last podcast, but if you can't make sense of a moment, so experience design is so interesting because there's all these things happening that your brain has to be super awake and focused and present versus like, those days where you like go to sleep, you're like, what happened? Like, how did I get here? Well, I just floated. And that's that's what you kind of share. Like, a lot of people have that experience after they're like 40. They're like, wait a minute. Like, I was just born, like, and they just have the first kind of like wake up moment that creates panic and like midlife crisis and all these things. But to be like, as present as possible for as long as possible. So I'd love you to share just like things that you remind yourself of throughout the day to maintain presence.
Yeah. I think what you spoke to, I love the framework, kind of Sadhguru. I heard first from Sadhguru is like, life is a certain amount of time and energy. And so it could seem like somebody has led the life of 100 people because they compiled their energy in a way that 1,000 people would have, because they've been able to manage their energy in a certain way within the same amount of time. And so you could, and it's not, when I say energy, it's not just activity in life, it's not just like doing more, right? You could, do so much in life, but really not be effective in your energy, versus you could do one thing and have it change the world. So it's a shift of harnessing my energy into like, you kind of ask for like what I remind myself on a daily basis to become present. And for me, at least, it hasn't been as much of a conscious process of trying to, remind myself of something. don't leave it up to chance. And I have my discipline with my practices, because that is going to fundamentally shape you energetically. And so it's like, if you do the right things will happen to you in life. And so if I have these daily minimums of maybe reading a certain amount of 10 pages of a book a day, and working out 4 days a week, and doing sauna cold plunge 3 days a week, and doing my morning practice every single day, and like it can kind of seem a little rigid or a lot for most, and for sure, like build your way up into whatever that ideal flow is for your life. Then once you have that, it's just like you're creating the systems, and for, the systems for you to wake up and be present. You don't have to try to be present, because you just are. So like I said, and I spoke to earlier, it's removing the things that take us away from presence and health and vibrancy in our life, which there's so many different things, and from the mind and the body and the spirit that we could go into, to the things that you do, to the things you do. And yeah, I spoke to those a little bit earlier.
I would love to talk about psychedelics.
Sure.
Because, and you're actually maybe more unique than some guests that we've had on, in the sense that a lot of your experience that has, created a lot of like awakening, and your most powerful moments, like that we've chatted about separately, have come from meditation, through things like darkness retreat, which like creates psychedelic experiences. Like life is psychedelic. If you tap in, and if you look at the brain scans of someone that's deep in transcendental meditation, it's very similar of the brain scan of someone that has psilocybin in their system. Yeah. It's a lot more difficult, in my opinion, to get there through meditation. It takes a lot more like preparation and discipline. But psychedelics have been a part of your life. And I'd love you to share kind of when they entered, how they look in your life now, and, what your relationship is with the full spectrum of plant medicine and other, psychedelics, amphetamines, whatever you want to go into. Now. Yeah,
sure. So for me, psychedelics, and they have been a tool in my past to and why people, essentially, if you're doing it to raise your awareness, to enhance your perception and gain awareness about something in your life, whether you're doing it to release some trauma, to do some sort of healing within your life, right? It's been beautiful to see what's going on with like MAPS and now psilocybin more, where people are being able to move through PTSD and like various traumatic situations in life. And I think that psychedelics certainly has a place in society, and definitely Western culture, but also in the world, in terms of healing things in a way that, like you said, a lot of these Eastern traditional forms of meditation, for somebody that's just gone through 40, 50 years of trauma, or just got out of the military and various different things, psychedelics can be a blast into a healing space that might not, happen right off the bat with meditation. And so for me, my path has been predominantly and primarily more in breath work and meditation, and sort of these holistic ways of gaining awareness into my reality. And there's been, for sure, various different times in my life where I've explored psilocybin and MDMA, and it's always been in a ceremonial setting, in a sense, where I'm going into a forest alone and wanting to explore the edges of my consciousness, or in a group setting. I've done ayahuasca once or twice within 1 weekend, just because I was, very curious as to what the experience was like from everything that I've read and saw. All of the experiences, and I would kind of sum up as they didn't fundamentally change who I am, but they raised my awareness to certain parts of myself that then all the other practices and tools that I've had through that process of integration actually have remained in those changes, in those higher states of consciousness. So where a lot of people can go wrong in the, constant kind of never ending use of plant medicines, to where it can become something you're using as another experience. And it can kind of become an experience junkie in a sense, which there's no shame or judgment there. It's just, what are you using it for? Are you using it as a drug to have fun and to have an experience? Great, that's your path. Or are you using plant medicines more as a vehicle or a tool to raise awareness in your life, and realizing that it'll get you to a certain place. But for me to really raise your energies and your systems enough, just doing plant medicines, it's not going to take you to full liberation within yourself. It will give you insight into awareness into different parts of yourself that you can then integrate, but without doing the fundamental daily like stuff that we talked about earlier that has worked, at least for me, and my, I can only speak from my perception of how things have evolved for me. It will take you, plant medicines can take you to a very beautiful place, but they'll take you to a certain place that meditation can't. Meditation can bring you to that plant medicines can't. So yeah, I really view them as allies and amazing tools to be supportive. And I've seen a lot of individuals that have had life-changing experiences with mushrooms. And I think that especially in Western society, where like people are quickly, prescribed SSRIs and antidepressants for various different issues that they have, or depression, depressive moments in their life, to realize that it's a drug that the pharmaceutical companies are pushing to make money, right? They're a business. And I would much rather explore something that comes from the earth that is better for the system, especially if you're, it's a one or two off experience versus staying on a drug for decades of your life and the detriment that can have on your system. So, I mean, there's many different avenues and aspects that we could go into, but I think that it's really beautiful to see a lot of the work that's being done and the work that you're doing and this podcast. I think it's an important conversation to be having.
How do you, anticipate, which you could not know the answer to, but how do you anticipate that psychedelics will be a part of your future journey, if at all?
For me, it feels like, in terms of like self-inquiry and like really what I would be sitting with plant medicines more so for is gaining awareness of self. It feels like it's not necessary at this point in my life. So, and like where I see my life going and, in the decades to come and what I want to create, I ask myself why, like, what is the intention of sitting with a plant medicine? There's one avenue, which is like, there's, like I said, in the avenue of fun or community and play, but in terms of like really trying to raise your consciousness and have a deeper knowing of self, for me, it feels like at this point, there's nothing that I can't get from my current practice.
And the reason why I want to ask you that question is like, that's what I feel like the answer is. And that's actually so important to talk about, because as psychedelics are coming to the mainstream, again, like, it's funny when we call it, they've been used for thousands of years. Like they're a huge part of every culture that's ever, been alive since time has existed. There's been documentation of psychedelic ritual in these cultures and indigenous societies. But there's such a wave and excitement around ayahuasca and psilocybin and MDMA and all these things. And there's a careful dance of how you integrate them into your life. And these substances inherently by themselves do not cause addiction, but there is, problematic use of any of these substances. You can take too much of anything. Caffeine, doesn't matter what the substance is. But most people that I speak with, or at least that have come on the podcast, they're a more routine part of their life. And I think it's really, awesome that you have explored them and like see a lot of value in them, and you've pulled a lot of the rituals and things from psychedelics, but you've been doing a lot of this work from such an early age where you're able to maintain them without necessarily needing to, in theory, go to ayahuasca church every weekend, which a lot of people, are still doing. And that's something to look at as well. Like if you feel, a draw to a certain medicine, it's like you're like exactly what you're saying. It's just like asking yourself, what's the intention behind it? Because, any of these substances, the only legal one right now in the United States, ketamine, even though all the others are on their way for legalization at a slower pace than a lot of people would like, but they're on their way. Yeah. But, you can use them to dissociate or you can use them to connect. And so anyway, I'm excited that you're sharing that. And I think it's important for people to look at, like, is your season complete with them? Do you need them at all?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I can only really speak to my path and how things have evolved for me. Everyone's journey is unfolding differently. I do think, and I have seen for sure in certain plant medicine communities where it is a ceremony, right? And they do ceremonies every month. And I know people that have done these for years and years and years in life. And at least how my perception is kind of seeing things, a lot of times it becomes, again, another experience in which you keep reinforcing that there's a problem in your life that you need to heal. And there's like this healing cycle of continually going back to the medicine for healing. And that in many ways I feel like can be detrimental, because there's not true transformation happening. There's highs and lows happening, and that feels like change because it is, but transformation means a seed turns into a tree. And you could take a seed and you could put it in different environments and change the scenery, but if it's still a seed, it hasn't blossomed, it hasn't transformed. And for me, true transformation has come in these different modalities, moving energy up my spine and doing longer, prolonged periods of meditation. And there's so many different ways. Like yoga is such, and all the 8 limbs of it is such a science that unfortunately isn't popular in the West as just the asana practice of doing, going to hot yoga, which is great. But there's, it's just 1/8 of all that yoga has to offer. And so the science of awakening and self-realization in the path of yoga has personally felt like a deep calling for myself.
Okay. There's many more things I want to ask you about. I have a few more final questions for you. And I learned a lot about you on this episode. There's a lot that I know, but it's really special to understand like more of what makes up your brain. I love having these conversations, and it is a podcast primarily started about psychedelics. And one of the questions, like the last questions that we ask people, is always like, what is the greatest lesson that psychedelics are taught you? You can answer that from the lesson of what they haven't taught you as well. But with your work that you have done with mushrooms, ayahuasca, MDMA, if you had to pick one lesson that you've pulled away and implemented into your life, what would you say?
I mean, I think it's a common theme that probably most people have shared on this podcast is that
we are all one.
Quite literally, it sounds so cliche, but I think whether it's in any heightened state, right? It could be through meditation, it could be through plant medicine, to where you have the felt experience of our inherent interconnectedness. It gives you a reference point into what's possible. And if you can feel something once, you can feel something again. And why I think it's important to also feel it outside of plant medicine is to realize that you can feel it outside of plant medicine, that it's an actual state and energy that you can have and harness and hold and cultivate within your body, that you can walk around and feel inherently connected to more than just yourself, that you can have an expanded sense of self, that your sense of self can expand to include others and your friends and your family and eventually the whole world. And it's there's many different ways up that mountain and to that realization. But I think it's an important experience to have, however you experience it, and to know that it's a possible reality opens your eyes and lifts the veil of, holy shit, I've been living my life in this illusion of separation, and joy, peace, happiness are one notch away from a lot of the suffering that we experience to be mitigated. So that's what I would say.
The first time I ever did mushrooms, I still thought mushrooms were really bad for your brain. It's before I understood anything about mushroom. And the first thing I said once they hit, and I had, the first thing I said out loud was, I wish I could think like this all the time and not have to do mushrooms to do it, to think like this. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of truth in that, regardless of what, my misunderstanding of what mushrooms do to your brain. It's like, how do you take this feeling and recreate it? And I love what you said. Like, I actually think that, the lesson there for me was, if you can feel something once, you can feel it again. So everything is recreatable. It's not, there's obviously, a sense of impermanence with experience, and this moment will never be as it is ever again. But the feeling can be recreated and added to. There's not a peak on the joy.
Yeah.
Or the despair, or whatever emotion. Like, there's just, anyway, I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
My last question for you is, you're creating a lot in the world. If you had to, share with people that are listening, the thing that you're the most excited about in the next 6 months, what people can be on the lookout for you, like whether it's the podcast or other ventures, what should people be paying attention to, and where can they find you?
People should be paying attention to themselves first and foremost. But if you want to check out what I'm doing, yeah, I mean, the podcast it feels like starting my podcast production company first off was, like I spoke to earlier, the realization of how this amazing opportunity we have to share these messages and raising consciousness. It's been so fulfilling. And, I've had a lot of practice of producing other people's content, from my time working on Impulsive with Logan to building the company and supporting amazing podcasts and content creators like yourself. And for me, Know Thyself, my podcast, has been the culmination of my skill set, my desire, what I feel like the world needs, what is uniquely available to me in like my genuine seeking. And I can show up as an archetype of the seeker and somebody that's on the path that I think can ask questions that elicit authentic responses and give unique perspectives on life that a lot of podcasters maybe don't have the bandwidth or wherewithal to kind of go into these certain different topics, or really just the desire to explore these different dimensions that I'm really passionate about. And so the podcast truly feels like my offering to the world, and it's something that I love doing. And so it's like finding that cross section feels like the rarest gem that I could find. And to think that it's, only a month or two from having been released, I have a big vision for where it will go and what will come from it in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I'm sure it'll unfold more beautiful than I can even imagine. But that's going to be the place where people can really find what I pour myself into.
It's your first real baby.
Yeah.
Definitely your first. It's a great baby starter kit.
Yeah.
You love this thing so much and you can feel it. You're so excited about it. We had just last final story I'll share with everyone is André had like a podcast release party. And it was so cool because it also, some of the things that people shared was it gave a lot of people to, permission to celebrate a lot of these things in their life that they're creating, especially as it comes to like, pursuits that we really love. So this whole celebration and podcast release party, we all asked André questions and like watched some clips of the episodes. And so my takeaway from that, and like anyone listening, is like celebrate yourself more, celebrate the things you're creating more, throw parties around it, invite people over for dinner to like acknowledge and celebrate these like chapter points in life. So I had the value already that like you creating this has created for experiences outside of just the one-on-one shows and people listening has been really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming to hang with me on my couch today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So easy. The fact that we get to do this kind of for a living is like pretty ridiculous. So
yeah, it is.
It's great.
I love you a lot. I'm so grateful for everything you're creating. I can't wait to watch the whole journey and be a part of it and support any way we can.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you and just equally sending that love and reflection back to you. I'm so proud of what you're creating at your age with your mind and how alive you are. Like you're one of the most alive individuals I've ever met. And it's been so beautiful to see you, even just over the past year, expand your mycelium web into all these different creations and individuals and communities. And I just know that over the next 3 years, let alone 5 or 10 years, like to see what you're going to be creating is truly inspirational. And so any way I can support, I'm here as an ally. I love you so much.
I love you. More to come.
Yeah.
Oh. Thanks for diving into the multiverse with us. If you're interested in being a future guest on the show, sponsorship, partnership, or you're just mushroom curious, we're always looking to expand our mycelium network. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Into the Multiverse, where you can find clips from this podcast, psychedelic legalization news, events that we're doing, and so much more. In addition, we've also created the world's first ever mushroom-specific marketplace called The Multiverse, which you can find on Instagram at Multiverse or online at yourmultiverse.com. We've also created our own in-house consumer lifestyle brand called Supermush. We make mushroom mouth sprays. We make a whole line of mushroom streetwear. You can find it on Instagram at Supermush or online at supermush.com. We'll see you next week. Much love.